Hello, welcome back to That's What I'm Talking About, Drunk Middle-earth History, the show that I started because I wasn't able to do my Star Wars podcast because of some strikes, but at the time of recording this, it looks like the strikes are over, so yay, this is actually potentially the last episode of this. Sad, aw, but not so sad. Today we're joined by Adal Rifai. Adal, welcome.
Glug, glug, glug. Drinks, thank you so much for having me.
I am very happy that you agreed to this very stupid request where essentially I ask people to come on and it's a reverse drunk history where usually on the show the host invites people on to talk and he listens and I make the opposite happen.
Stupid was the key, or whatever you said. Stupid, silly, that's my wheelhouse, baby. So any podcast, every podcast, as long as we're not taking ourselves too serious, I'm happy to be here.
That's been my motto, honestly, for podcasting in the Tolkien realm for over 4 years now. There's too many people out there who take themselves too seriously, and I endeavor to not be any of those people. And
yeah, I'm guessing there's a lot of, I want to say, they're probably called Tolkienites. Would eat you alive if you make one misstep. So the best thing to do is just make several missteps and stop caring and hope they move on.
Yeah, that's a great philosophy to have about life in general. I like the word Tolkienite. It sounds like a space rock or a space mineral or something.
Would you believe this sword is made from Tolkienite? Recently I was on a trip. And I overheard a conversation between two people from Canada, and the guy was like, where are you from? And the woman goes, I'm a Calgarian. And I sat up and was like, bah? I did a double take, and I was like, Calgarian? That's what alien race? Is this did I just make a discovery? And then I'm like, oh, that's what you call someone from Calgary. But it just sounds
it does sound cool. Yeah.
There's all these authors who are bending over backwards to be like, the Clormadorps took the Storflarf, and it's like Calgarians was right there. That's a good one.
That's pretty good, yeah.
Yeah.
And then you have people like J.R.R. Tolkien who named the evil mountain Mount Doom. So
right on the nose.
Yeah.
Yep.
So there's a lot of ways that you can go in making those fantasy names, and I think we've learned that you don't have to try too hard.
Yeah, and I can't tell if he was at the end of his rope or if it was his first inspiration, because there's characters like, the different unique mouthful of names that Tolkien created, but then you have good old Tommy B, Tom Bombadil. That's just, I don't know if that was his first one and then it got more complex, or if it was he was just out of names. He was like, just fucking Tom Bombadil. Can I get away with Tom?
I believe not to do the thing that a lot of Tolkien creators, a lot of Tolkienites do, where you bring up something simple and then it's like, well, actually, I have a complex answer for that, because in the world of Tolkien, everything has a complex answer. But I believe the name Tom Bombadil came from one of his kids' toys, and he turned it into a character.
Oh, that's cool, Sal. Do you know what type of? It's like a weird British toy, instead of the Ken doll,
they have
a Tommy.
Yeah, can you imagine if the Barbie movie was? But yeah, it's Barbie and Tom Bombadil.
and Tom Bombadil. So Barbie's Barbie, and Tom Bombadil's like a god, basically. He's a shape-shifting god. But I like to think that he had I know they found his manuscripts, and I think that's where the Silmarillion comes from. I don't know if I'm saying that right.
You said it right enough.
But I'm curious if there's in the footnotes, he's like Gary Magic. And then Gary Magic came to town, and then he's like, no, 2 books in, this is going to get weird. I hope there's a whole list of names that he was maybe too scared
workshopping.
to use. Yes.
I believe, I think Frodo's name originally was something like Bungo.
Oh, we could have had Bungo.
I believe it's the name of one of his distant relatives, but I think that was potentially the name of Frodo's character. And
it's like a Marx brother.
And Aragorn was originally a Hobbit-like character named Trotter. So
Trotter's evocative. He is a traveler, someone who,
It's no Strider, though. Strider's definitely way cooler.
Strider's way cooler. And I guess Trotter, having the trots, I think that's code for diarrhea. So maybe not. Yeah, you're okay. It turned out. It turned out okay.
I'm interested. They did, I think, just recently released. I don't know if it's that they found more letters or that like more were like there were edits added or something. But there was, I think, very recently a new edition of like letters from J.R.R. Tolkien's letters or something was published.
Yeah.
So I've never delved into that because it seems like sometimes I just want to have fun and imagine with this world, and I don't need an answer for everything, you know?
Yeah, I agreed. And I think it's also opening a can of worms to, you know, if you're like, oh, I'm going to take a deep dive into his letters and his personal correspondence. And then he's like, Dear Martha, that's Southern. He's not Southern. Well, we'll stick with it. Dear Martha, regret to inform you that I now hate people from this region of the country.
It's like today I kicked 12 puppies, and then I laughed at the orphans on the side of the road.
I ate a baby like
all my love to Charles. I say every day I'm glad Tolkien's dead. And that he's not on Twitter, and I don't have to apologize or defend egregious mistakes that he has made.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And that's why I'm going on to the most unproblematic piece of work in fandom next, which is Star Wars. Nothing bad happens there. I'm sure it'll be fine.
Okay.
So when I reached out, I gave this list of like potential topics that we could discuss and talk about. And what was it about the forging of the rings that called to you as the One Ring calls to Frodo? What about this topic where you're like, that sounds fun, let's talk about that?
Yes. Well, of all the topics, this one ruled them all.
Boo.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me and for the support. I think there's just something inherently funny about this high, complex fantasy world, and then that there's this jewelry that comes into play, and it's like, all these men had these rings, and like we were swapping them out, and some were like kind of better than others, and we, you know, somebody had a secret ring. So it's so funny to me that a lot of the mythology revolves around jewelry. I think that's very funny. So, and I think it was cool that back then, and probably in England too, in the late 1800s, early 1900s, a lot more men wore rings. I feel like unless it's a wedding ring, you don't see nowadays, or unless you're like Johnny Depp or Jared Leto, you don't see a lot of rings at play in the common man, I believe.
Yeah. And you know, it's actually come full circle because I get targeted ads now because a lot of like companies and other like influencers and stuff, I think just assume I am a man because obviously women can't talk about Lord of the Rings.
Of course.
So I get a lot of targeted. I once got a message to do a brand deal with like a male genitalia like grooming kit. And I was like, well, I can't help you there. I was like, I respect the hustle, but
and just to be clear, I'm on this podcast to explain to you, right?
Yeah. So anyway, I've been getting targeted ads for like ring companies that are making like man rings, and a lot of them are named like the Ring of Dirt, like Elrond's ring. What's the name? Gimli. It was like the Ring of Gimli, and they're all these like inspired by like obviously like Tolkien, you know, characters, like man rings. So we've really come full circle.
Full circle, nature's ring.
There we go.
Even my wedding ring, I love this. It's a beautiful ring. But my wife got this for me. Who else? And it's like aged bourbon barrel, and then it's inlaid with deer antler, and it's just so funny. Of like, I would just wear metal, but it's like something died so that you could prove you're married. Like it just seems so
you're wearing bones.
Pagan. Yeah, exactly.
And then meanwhile, these the rings that like the elves and dwarves and everything are carrying around are like super cool looking, and they have like pretty gems, and they're very like pretty. And I bet like as modern day, like I don't know, beauty standards, they could very easily be adapted into like wedding rings, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then also, I guess pretty cool too that this topic, like the entirety of Lord of the Rings centers around a ring. And so looking at like, well, what is this thing that caused all this trouble?
So much trouble. I also love, before you reminded me of something, which is, I also love that each ring has like beautiful little poetry, but it's hidden on the inside, where it's like, I don't want anybody to see my poetry, my little spell, my little rhyme. It's on the inside, right? Or is it on the outside?
I don't know. And I don't know if that's true of all of the rings. It is possible. But the One Ring, I think it appears on maybe the inside, but it's like a whole ass poem, and I don't know how it got inscribed in the ring. I don't know the like whatever dark language, but I guess maybe a lot of words and phrases can be like consolidated to
maybe it's a lot of homonyms. So if you just keep repeating it, you can glean different meanings from it.
Yeah. Or it's like that scene from The Office where Kevin like skips words and he's like, why use more words when less words do good?
Yeah, it's like an 1800s telegraph language where it's like, me make it home, like caveman talk almost. Stop, full stop. I'm paying per letter, so let's keep it short.
Yeah. A question for you. This is a pop quiz.
Ooh.
How many rings are there?
Okay. We have the one, I know this part in the movie where they're like, blank rings to the elves, blank rings to the dwarves, couple
the important
for the
part is what is in those blanks. Yeah.
Yes. A couple for the fellas. And then the one ring to rule them all. I'm going to say elves got 5, dwarves got 7 or 8, and the men got 10, and then the 1. So that's 19, what did I say, 24? 24 total hours in a day?
Close. It's 20.
Okay. Ooh, nice.
Now, to be fair, that is an answer that I also would not know off of the top of my head, because I also kind of forget all the numbers every time. And I know there's the 9 for the men, and then the 1, and then I kind of forget the rest. And then math is also hard sometimes, you know?
Yes,
so,
exactly. Thank you.
But yeah, there are 20, 3 for the elves, 7 for the dwarves, 9 for men, and then 1 ring to rule them all. So we have to go back, or I guess another pop quiz question for you. Do you know who created the rings?
It had to be either De Beers, Zales, or I want to say Jared's.
He went to Jared. Can you imagine if Jared did a Lord of the Rings collaboration?
Sauron spent 6 months' salary. Is that how much it is? 3 months' salary? How much are you supposed to spend on a ring? 3 months' salary. He spent 3 months' salary to build these beautiful rings. I do wish, Mary Clay, Sauron had spread it out a little bit. I think it would be way more fun and interesting of a story if it was like 2 to the elves, 3 to the dwarves, 6 for the men. We got 1 to the hobbits. We got a couple for like bartenders, 2 to the bartenders. Like really, like the horses get 1. Like it's the worst one, but horses get 1. Like I think it would have been more fun to really spread it out and really, because I think that sows more chaos than just sticking to 3 different races.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a limitation of Tolkien and a limitation of Sauron, by extension. Yeah. That they neglected to consider the horse lords.
Consider the Horse, my favorite David Foster Wallace novel. I guess it's more essays. I think the elves, I think I had seen Rings of Power. I know I've seen Rings of Power, but I think in Rings of Power, I think the elves make at least some of the rings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that I later learned that the way that they have gone about that in the show is very contentious. Because technically, the elven rings were the last to be made, and in the show, they were the first. So
why? That's so weird to be like, this is for the fans, and then be like, fuck the books. That's because it's like $1 billion. Isn't it like the most expensive TV show ever made or something?
Yeah, it's because I believe, I don't know. I mean, I'm absolutely making this up, but my personal belief is that Jeff Bezos is a Tolkien fan, unfortunately. Like every fandom has one of them. Every fandom has a Jeff Bezos. And it's my personal belief that he is the most excited of all the properties or whatever that he can do, that like he has personal stakes in this one. And so
gotcha. Okay.
Potentially it's like the favorite child of Amazon Prime Studios because Jeff is a fan. So I don't know. But yeah, it's a very expensive show. And I don't understand. Honest to God, I would have been fine if they canceled after season 1, if it meant that we could get a complete season 2 of A League of Their Own, which was
so good.
Such a good show and was canceled in such a painful way. So I would have been fine to see Rings of Power go. But yeah, it's the most, very expensive show. And I believe they're slated for 4 seasons, 5 seasons.
Damn. Must be nice. I do think there might be a nice compromise where at least if they could just cast Darcy Carden and Abby Jacobson in Rings of Power as I feel like the Lord of the Rings it's very serious. I feel like Rings of Time, and also just here's my, if I may take a stance, and this
Jeff,
is Jeff,
are you listening? Are you listening?
Jeff, JB, put down X. Here's my hot take. I think so much fantasy would be better if they involved comedians. I watched some of Wheel of Time. I watched Rings of Power. I watched, all these different properties. If you just cast a comedian, like get fucking Bill Hader in there as an elf or something. Like I think they're going to bring so much warmth, and I just feel like so many of the shows I watch, the fantasy shows, are just so cold and sterile. And it's like we're fighting to defeat evil, and I'm like, if nobody's fucking fun and funny in this world, just die. Like, who gives a shit?
Like, what's the point of living in a world with dragons and swords and magic rings if no one is funny?
Yes, exactly. So it's like, please cast more comedians, put Abby Jacobson and Darcy Carden in this show. Who gives a shit that there's a Lebanese halfling? That shouldn't be your battle online. The casting should not be your focus online. Who gives a shit? It's a fantasy world. Let's all get involved. But we need more comedy.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a great. Yeah, so much fantasy takes itself too seriously, and which is so interesting because it's like it has the most potential to be fun.
Yes,
and it's so serious. Yeah, and so many parts of it are so. I don't know if you've heard this phrase being thrown around the interwebs. People have been saying unserious a lot lately. Sometimes fantasy is so unserious. It's not that big a deal.
Wait, I can't comprehend what's going on. Unserious? What is that? So that means
I think it's meant to say like this thing that we're making out to be an insane deal. It's not that serious, y'all.
I see. Okay. So. I see. So I assumed unserious meant more playful and jovial, but in the context of most fantasy is unserious.
Let's see what Urban Dictionary says.
I think most fantasy is serious. I think Terry Pratchett got it right.
That's the one that I just unserious. An unserious guy is someone who lacks the ability to be serious.
Oh, okay.
So maybe lacking. Anyway,
sound like an accusation towards me, but no harm, no foul.
Yeah, Terry Pratchett's one that I need to dive into next, or at least experience some of that, because that has come up so many times throughout. Like clearly, like there are so many paths that like Lord of the Rings and like as establishing the fantasy genre that like it branches off into, and like I would love to explore more of that, but also at the same time I don't care enough.
Yeah. I think it's like 55
I'm just
books
now
or
getting around
so,
I'm just now getting around to Star Wars, so
pick your battles.
Yeah. So Sauron is the main person behind all of the ring creations. So let's back up a bit, and by back up a bit I mean like 2 ages. Okay. At the end of the first age, there's this huge battle between the big baddie at the time. His name is Melkor, and Sauron is like his right-hand man. And so there's this huge battle, and Melkor's defeated, and like shit happens, whatever. So Sauron flees into the east. I always have to do my compass when I do directions. I always have to do I also have to hold my hands up with L and R whenever someone says left and right. I don't know if you share that problem, but I do.
I don't yet, but I'm willing to learn.
Yet that makes me feel old.
Wait, why'd you emphasize me?
I shouldn't be. I promise I'm not having mental issues at the ripe old age of 28.
I believe. Yeah, I trust you're fine.
So he goes off into the east and hides and bides his time and essentially builds up his powers, and he starts building this fortress Barad-dûr in what later becomes Mordor. And then he takes on the persona of Anatar, the Lord of Gifts. And supposedly I think this is supposed to be the show has Halbrand, the really hot guy who Galadriel should have turned dark for, but that's neither here nor there. Talk about
the one I
the
should have
books.
turned dark for. Yeah,
yeah. The one we all have, the one that got away.
Mm-hmm.
You've heard of that one. Now get ready for the one I should have gone dark for. So supposedly that's like the equivalent of Anatar in the show. It's this like human persona that he uses to like trick and like beguile people. And he befriends the elves, and there are some leaders of the elves who are like not fooled at all and are like, this guy seems shady as hell, do not trust him. But it's not enough, and he still kind of like befriends the elven smiths, and they're very impressed by like the knowledge that he has and the skills that he has. And eventually they start creating. This is where like some of the timeline kind of annoys me because there's a lack of detail. It just says in the year 1500, the Rings of Power were started to be created. And then by 1590, I believe they were finished.
That's the first time I've ever in my life, and I don't think you're wrong, but I just want to call it like I sees it. That's the first time in my life I've ever heard somebody accuse Tolkien of not giving enough
detail. I guess that is true. It's just like, it's annoying because it's like, but this is what the book is about. This is what the book is about.
If you're going to write it, be clear about it.
Like what? So I think my understanding is that they were working on creating just like general rings of power for many, many years. And that several, like more than the 20 that are special, several were created. And then eventually like these 20 rings or whatever were like singled out as being the cool ones. Out of these rings that are created with the guidance of Sauron, or rather Anatar, come the dwarven rings. And then I wrote down men rings, but that just sounds weird. But like it's the race of men.
I think Mings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's those. It's your deer antler ring.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah,
You got to use it to punch stuff.
Yeah, I don't diary. No, I have a journal.
Did you just give me a thumbs up?
No, I think you gave a thumbs
I
up.
literally was not touching the Zoom screen.
Oh, really? My arms are folded, so.
Wait, what? Does it?
I think there's a new update where if you give a thumbs up, and if you like wave, there's balloons or something. I've seen this somewhere. Does it do it? Maybe not. Maybe now that I'm talking about it, it's not going to do it. But
I don't like the way that technology is moving. I don't like that at all. So yeah, the Dwarven and the Mings were created first. Then there's a guy named Celebrimbor, and he is an elven prince. He's descended from this like very problematic, dramatic line of elves that have an entire other history that actually I did a whole episode on a couple weeks ago. So if anyone wants to know about Celebrimbor's ancestry, go back and listen to that. His father is Curufin, who is a brother of Feanor. Anyway, it's sentences like that when I'm like, that was gibberish.
Yes.
And I said it with such confidence.
Yeah. Let's get a Mark. Let's get a Josh in there.
So he's an elven prince and a smith. And he also distrusted Anatar. Behind his back, without his knowledge, he creates the elven rings. But he does it using the knowledge and the skills that Anatar taught them. So they do still have that like magical whatever power that they have. We do have some knowledge about what the dwarven rings do, but other than that, and like the one ring can make you invisible, I have no clue what the rest of the rings, like what is their power.
Gotcha.
And I don't.
So each one has each ring, obviously the one ring. So the one ring turns you invisible and then rules the
and
other
that's
rings?
just
Is that
honestly, the One Ring turning you invisible is just it's kind of confusing because we're not sure if that's just for hobbits or if that's for all of the other previous like possessors of the ring.
Mary Clay, can I say, since I got this ring on my finger, anytime I go to a bar, I'm invisible as well.
Boo. Anyway, yeah, so the rings I don't think it was meant for him to like assign a separate power to each of them. Like perhaps if Lord of the Rings were written today, I feel like an author would be like, oh, the dwarven rings can give you, the power for wealth. And the elven rings give you the power of wisdom and, but Tolkien, I don't think did that, which is why it's confusing that some of the rings, some of the rings do things and some of them don't. And I'm like, but why are the elven rings so special? It just says that like they are forged with this like binding magic. And I'm like, but what is that magic? What does that mean? Like, and that's the details that we don't get, at least to my knowledge.
That's something, okay, this is something that frustrates me when I watch the movies, because I've read the books once and I've seen the movies 10 times or whatever. It frustrates me because I don't understand the full capabilities of the ring. I don't understand all its different ins and outs. So there's moments where like, I think Gandalf is tempted at one point of like, oh yes, I could wear the ring. And he's like, no. And I'm like, why would you, like, I know the ring has this ability to like cajole or like tempt. It's almost like the when you put a pie on a windowsill in Looney Tunes and the smell wafts over.
Yeah, I'm familiar.
It's a beckoning finger that lifts you off your feet. I know it has that kind of power where it tempts you, but I'm like, does Gandalf need to be invisible? Like, because to me, that's the one power, except for controlling other rings. But the other rings are gone, or I don't know. I don't understand. So even when Cate Blanchett's like, I could be, instead of you'd have a queen.
Queen of Darkness. Yeah, and I'm like, that sounds pretty good to me, honestly.
I'm like, all that power because you could turn invisible? Like, I don't know.
So I think with the One Ring, it's dangerous in the hands of people like Gandalf or Elrond or Galadriel, because then they would be able to control the rest of the races. And
the other races have their rings still at that point?
You know what? Good point, because the dwarves actually don't at that point.
Okay.
So...
But that's my thing, is like, I assume that all the rings were gone or lost or whatever.
I think it would just mean that like Galadriel's Dark Galadriel, but it's not like she has I keep forgetting that like the elves don't actually have like powers.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I don't know. Like Gandalf, I get, because he's a wizard, and you don't like, we see what a dark wizard is with Saruman.
It's almost like give a mouse a cookie. Never give a wizard a ring. That's the one. Do not. It's not. And I do feel like, to my simple brain, you talk about like modern days, if somebody were to write this today, my simpleton brain is like, do it like Captain Planet did. We got earth, we got wind, we got fire, heart, whatever that is, where it's like, now I get it. If Gandalf gets the water ring, boy, oh boy, the tides come crashing down. That I understand. But when it's this vague thing of like, you turn invisible, and then also, who knows what else? It gives you great ideas. I just don't understand it.
Yeah. So speaking of that idea, the 3 elven rings actually are of elements.
Wow.
They are named.
Wow.
They are named Narya, the Ring of Fire.
Pretty close to Narnia.
Vilya, the Ring of Air. And this one's my favorite. The Ring of Water is called Ninya. And I like that one just because it sets up a really nice Ninya business joke.
Yes. Whose ring is that? Ninya business.
Ninya what? Ninya business. So Celebrimbor, behind the back of Sauron, creates the 3 elven rings. So that, my guess is just so that there are rings that he's not aware of that are like outside of his influence and control.
Gotcha.
And then shortly after that, Sauron by himself in Mount Doom creates the One Ring. And the goal of that is to have a dominion over the rings that are owned by the dwarves and the men. Okay. So by this time, Sauron had given 6 of the rings to dwarves and 9 of the rings to men. And when he creates the One Ring, it kind of like, I imagine. So the elves have their rings, and I imagine they like light up like superhero rings when the One Ring is created, and they're alerted basically that Sauron has betrayed them. They were all of them deceived. Is that part of the movie prologue?
Yes.
And so that triggers them to then hide the three rings, and then additionally, Celebrimbor gives one of the remaining rings to another dwarven lord.
This is almost like, I feel like I'm at a Mormon wedding where it's like 20 rings, one rules them all. There's 19 others. This is no shade to Brandon Sanderson. My apologies. This is a lot of math.
Is Brandon Sanderson Mormon?
Oh yeah.
Oh no.
And that's my theory.
I did not know that.
Do we know if he listens? Because otherwise, okay.
Brandon Sanderson, if you listen, I will. You message me. I will delete all of this stuff. You come on the pod.
Wow. Yeah, I'll say he's my favorite modern day fantasy author by far. But I will say my theory is that because he's Mormon, he probably has like 40 wives in a basement who are on typewriters, just like tap, tap, tap. Because he's the most prolific author.
It's insane. Maybe
even more than Stephen King, or at least neck and neck with Stephen King. I feel like he puts out 17 books a year. And it's like, meanwhile, George R.R. Martin is like, I don't know, this book will come out in another 30 years. Like, Sanderson is so prolific. There's something going on there.
I'm so glad you were brave enough to finally speak out about this issue.
And it's quality. It's quality work.
Is it though? Is it? See that? I mean, I've only read one of his. Yeah. I've only read one of his trilogies, and honestly, was it even by Brandon Sanderson? Let me look this up and make sure.
Mistborn? Or?
No, I could not get into
Wheel of Time?
I read it's his Reckoners series. The first book is called Steelheart. And I read that and was like, okay, cool. What a great series. I wonder if this author has more. And the kind of, so I've heard similar stories, honestly, about Tolkien, where people will, like, when they're kids, they'll read The Hobbit and be like, that was a cool book. I wonder if this guy wrote anything else. I just severely lack the ability to believe that someone can crank out that many stories and all of them are good.
What I've read is good. The Stormlight Archive is maybe my favorite fantasy series ever. This guy's so prolific. How prolific is he? He's so prolific. Other fantasy authors are dying. Robert Jordan. And he's like, I got it. And then he picked up the slack and wrote, I think, the last 3 books of Wheel of Time or something based on Robert Jordan's notes. He's like, I'll figure it out. And he wrote the last 3 books. That's how this guy's this guy's inhuman.
That's insane. I kind of want, and the Tolkien estate would never, but I kind of want the Tolkien estate to like ship him whatever notes J.R.R. Tolkien had in his study and be like, write something and just see what comes out.
Go. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Anyway, yeah, so there's all these rings. I don't think there are any wives. Honestly, with the way that Lord of the Rings goes, there's probably no women involved in the owning of these rings. Actually, I take that back. So Sauron creates the One Ring. The elves decide to hide their 3 rings. Gil-galad keeps 2 of them and later gives them away, and he sends the 3rd one to Galadriel. Mm-hmm. And Galadriel has this elven ring throughout the entirety of the storyline, up until the very end when she and everyone else get on that boat and go away. So she keeps 1 ring. Not the one ring, but a ring. Yeah. The Elven King his name is, I don't even know what names I've said at this point. His name is Gil-galad. Okay. And he,
I feel like anytime I hear a character name that's outside the ones I know, it feels like I'm having like a mini stroke or something. Or like, well, like my brain is just like, can't translate this one.
No, they're dumb. They're real dumb. It's okay.
I feel like
valid.
Gandalf, great fucking name. Gollum, great. It's so just such a visceral name. Frodo is good. Bilbo,
Gil-galad,
Samwise, Merry, Pippin, so good. But then you get into these other ones, and it's like clearly he spent less time.
Celebrimbor.
He used like a name generator. Whatever name generators were in the early 1900s, he used that.
You throw a typewriter on the floor. all the keys pop off, and then you take the handful of keys, and you like a witch doing like or a fortune teller throwing like bones into
bones,
the fire.
Yes. You play a game of Scrabble. You go until you can't make any more words with your letters, and then you just write that verbatim down. That's the name. Or you throw open the sash like a Dickensian novel. You throw down a tuppence, and you say, "You there, boy? What's the name?" And the boy goes, "Gromoloff," and they're like, "Perfect. Go find the fattest goose in the window."
What's annoying though is that every single name has some kind of meaning or etymology behind it that lines up with the languages that he has created.
Okay, that's pretty cool, actually.
It's frustrating. It's infuriating, actually.
Okay, yes, I agree with you. Just trying to agree with you. Yes,
be
you're
positive.
Right. It is frustrating. Yeah. Yes, of course. Whatever you say. Are there now? There's orcs, and then there's urukai, and urukai. Are they like super orcs? What are urukai? Because Sauron makes those motherfuckers out of mud, I think, and then he puts a little palm print on their head and they come to life. Are there women version? Because I hope that there's like women in the urukai, because then we can have somebody finds a ring, the urukai gets down on one knee and says, "Looks like marriage is back on the menu," and she says, "Yes, of course."
Yes, all of that is actually scripted for the next season of Rings of Power.
Perfect.
You predicted it. And who says there's no comedy and fantasy these days?
I demand an urukai spin-off series. Let's get like what's that Kevin James series? What was that sitcom he was in? King of Queens. Let's get like a King of Queens style sitcom with an urukai and his little family.
That'd be very cute.
He comes home from work. He hangs his mud up by the door and he's like, cracks open a beer.
I have interrogated the existence of like female orcs and whatnot, because the line looks like meets back on the menu boys implies that there is a gender binary in the orc society.
It also implies that urukai and orcs know what menus are, which implies that they, every once in a while, when they can afford it, go out to eat.
Oh, I've asked myself that question many times. Yeah. What is the like financial system or the currency in orc society?
Can you imagine? Okay, Mary Clay, close your eyes.
Okay.
You and I, we've been working 6 months at an Applebee's. It kind of sucks. A lot of people don't tip. People are always demanding this or that. This was undercooked. This was overcooked. What a long day. It's 8:45 p.m. Kitchen closes at 9. In walks 10 urukai. And they ask for a menu, and it's just like, and they're just smashing tables, they're killing people, and you're like, is this, what do I, and you can open your eyes now. Thank you for playing along. You're just like, is this worth it? Is this, what is going on? They hold the menus, they're holding them upside down, but you don't want to say anything. And they're like, "I'll take the meat," and you're like, there's like 14 dishes that have meat. What are you?
Don't you know that this Applebee's is actually entirely vegetarian?
Yeah. Looks like skillet brownies back on the menu, boys.
You know what? I think it's possible that future seasons of Rings of Power might actually have more orc content for you. Might not be in an Applebee's.
Yes.
But I think because there's that character Adal, who I barely remember what his involvement is, but he's like the father. They all call Adal means father. And he's like their leader or something.
Adar is father and Gandalf is mother. Can I just say? A lot of the names, you're fantastic, but I do wish in this moment, a lot of the names you're saying, I wish someone with an Australian accent was saying, because
Adar, yeah.
Arnar, Adar, and Mordor, Adar and Mordor.
We have maliciously mocked, which is unfortunate because the trilogy was filmed in New Zealand. So with a New Zealand accent,
right.
Mordor
yes.
would be absolutely insane to say.
I gotta find some behind the scenes footage of Peter Jackson saying Mordor. I'm
sorry, Peter Jackson. And all of New Zealand. So I think we were talking about Celebrimbor. I don't know.
Just very brief. Well, we're talking about Adar, I think. Isn't it so weird that Peter Jackson made arguably one of the best trilogies of all time? It's one of those weird things where it's like, not what weird thing, but in this day and age, is one of those things where you watch it and it still holds up. Like even the CGI or whatever else it just looks really good. It's so funny to me that he went from that, and it's just like you have the keys to any car in the lot.
You can do anything. You can do
anything.
anything.
Yeah, and he's like, I want to let me see. I want to take a Vietnam War footage and turn it color, and then I want to, or whatever, I forget what war it was. Vietnam was probably filmed in color, but he made a war documentary that was all in color, where he remastered it, and then he did like the 3-hour, 6-hour Beatles documentary, and I'm like, how cool is that he's like, I'm basically the next Steven Spielberg. Fooled you. I'm actually the next Ken Burns. Like, what a pivot, and he's. God bless. Like, we need more of that cool shit that he's doing.
I think a similar trajectory, or not dissimilar, from Daniel Radcliffe, who
all Broadway mostly
finished the Harry Potter films, could have done anything under the sun. Anything under the sun would. Well, he could have been Guns Iron Akimbo, Man. I guess. Yeah. He could have he could have had anything, and he has since chosen to do clearly things that he only is passionate or cares about.
Yes.
Like, never in a million years, if you had gone back to like 2007 me and said Daniel Radcliffe will star in a biopic of Weird Al, I would have been like, that's nonsense.
It's so good. I think because he idolized and then worked with Gary Oldman, obviously.
Yeah.
I think Gary Oldman was like his mentor and was like, you should do more stage and do whatever, like, now that you've done these blockbusters. But it was cool to be like, when he finished, I saw him in a Martin McDonagh play on Broadway, and I was like, oh, he's got
that's super obscure. Yeah.
Yeah, he's got theatrical chops. He was famously in Equus, where he was
know
fully
about
nude.
That,
and people flipped out. He's currently in Merrily We Roll Along.
Yeah. Have you by any chance watched the they did like, is it Forbes? There's some website that does like the lie detector tests, and it was him and his 2 co-stars did the lie detector test, and it's like the funniest video I've ever seen.
I'll have to watch this. Him, Jonathan Groff, and I forget.
I think her name is Lindsay Mendez.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
And then I just saw some news about that production today. I think they're like releasing their album or something soon.
Very cool.
Yeah, like very cool career trajectory. And I'm just like, you know what, Daniel, good for you. I'm glad you're living your dream. So the dwarven rings are super interesting because, like I said earlier, they have this adverse effect on the dwarves where, because of Sauron gave them to the dwarves hoping to control them, and he's very easily able to control the men, as we know from the prologue. I forget what the prologue says, but it's like, but men are weak and spineless and we're easily manipulated to be evil beings. But dwarves, it says, quote, "The dwarves indeed prove tough and hard to tame. They ill endure the domination of others. Their thoughts cannot be turned to shadow." So their very being would be refuses to be controlled by the rings, but it does have this adverse effect on them where they become very greedy, because this is one of the powers, again, of the rings that I don't get. The rings help them in their mining, and it helps them to like increase their wealth like exponentially. Okay. And so that's why the dwarves become this like very like wealthy people. And then the rings still negatively affect them, and that greed affects them. And that's how we end up with the dwarves dug too greedily and too deep. And then the Balrog emerges and eventually, leads to their own downfall. And then I went down a rabbit hole of my own thoughts. So just bear with me for a second, because I find this so fascinating and cool. Yeah. And we don't talk about the dwarves enough. I have since come to really love the dwarves. I think their lore is so cool, and the movies and everything else is just like the elves. But what about the elves?
What about? I want to issue a very quick apology statement. Let me put on my reading glasses and unfold this piece of paper that I wrote out with the help of my.
I'm scared. What are you going to say?
I, Adal Rifai, having guested on podcast about Lord of the Rings, I want to apologize to Gimli the dwarf. I previously said fantasy could use more comedy. I totally forgot how fucking funny that guy is in the movies when he says lines such as "toss me" and "my axe." So I just want to apologize to Gimli. I hope you will accept my apology. Yeah. I'm learning and growing every day. That wasn't a knock against dwarves, but there is some comedy in Lord of the Rings.
Yes. And also a shout out to the dwarves in the Rings of Power show. Some of the comedy moments also came from them. Mm-hmm. Yeah, very, very appreciated, underrated, lovely moments. Could do with more of them though.
Yeah, less burps and farts, and more like
yes. Oh my god, thank you.
More like funny lines or like funny characters, like personality traits.
I agree.
But I feel like a lot of times they'll bring in like someone to punch up the script and like, okay, yeah, it's pretty serious. What if he takes a big swig of mead and then he burps?
Yeah,
and they're like,
which is a literal scene from the extended edition of Two Towers.
They're all dying, like crying on the floor. They're like, unbelievable. This is insane. Yes, put it in.
I don't get it.
I don't get it.
So the dwarves, the intention with Sauron was to be able to control them. But the way that they are, that mission fails. But he kind of plays a long game with it, and this is probably not even what he intended. But that greed that the rings cause leads to their own destruction. Their like city center of Moria and Khazad-dûm is destroyed by that would be another very fun word.
Moria's destroyed.
It's destroyed by the Balrogs and ravaged by war. From there, the dwarves are like split up, and they have this huge like diaspora, and they become a like very wandering, separated people, and they're very divided. They're very weak. They have lost all of this wealth and influence that they once had. And so in that regard, Sauron kind of like he like knocked them down several pegs, and they're like no longer much of importance to him. But then this comes around to bite him in the ass later on. This is a like minor note in the appendices, by the way, and it's a very cool thing that I guess just didn't fit into the larger narrative of the story. But while the battle at the Black Gates is happening, over by Erebor, Durin's folk, a clan of dwarves, are fighting the battle on their own front against Sauron's forces, and they prevent Sauron's forces from going further inland towards Rivendell and Lorien. And Gandalf literally says, like, let us not forget the dwarves and their battle of Dale and the sacrifices they made. And were it not for their sacrifices, we might not have a queen of Gondor, implying that Arwen might have died. And so I think that's such a cool trajectory of events that like Sauron gave him these rings. The rings don't work, but the rings end up leading to their downfall anyway. But that downfall causes this kind of like lesser opinion perhaps that Sauron has of the dwarves. He underestimates them and then is later defeated. Very cool. Yeah.
Very cool. That there's cause and effect, and it's not just, of course, the wizard. It's like there's even a wizard makes human mistakes. I think that's fantastic. To underestimate the dwarf.
Yeah.
Never underestimate
a dwarf.
Never spit into the wind. Never tug on Superman's cape. Never underestimate a dwarf.
So the dwarven rings, throughout all of this like history that they've had with all these like different battles and attacks, and they have dragons and all that shit, 4 of them end up being destroyed. 2 of them are recovered by Sauron. And then the last one, which is the ring that Celebrimbor later gave to the dwarves separately, is, for some reason, it's called the Ring of Thror. That would be another fun word to have Peter Jackson say. Thror. Which is extremely hard to say, for anyone, I think.
It's like an Australian baseball announcer of like, hear the Thror of the crowd.
Yeah.
The Thror of the crowd.
Yeah.
That's an old-timey word.
So Thror is Thorin's grandfather. Thorin, the main dwarf from The Hobbit. And I texted TikTok expert Don Marshall and asked him, why is the ring called the Ring of Thror when Thror is the second to last owner of it? And he said he doesn't know. So we just have to guess.
Let the bodies hit the floor. Let the bodies hit the floor. Let the bodies hit the floor.
That's why. It just sounds dope,
Yeah,
I guess.
it just sounds fucking metal, baby.
Yes.
Can I ask something? And I don't know if you'll know this, but it's a legit curiosity of mine. I think, based on the visualizations that I've seen in the TV show and movies, dwarves tend to have pretty chunky digits, whereas elves have long, slender digits. Mm-hmm. Gollum famously is all skin and bones, even though I guess Smeagol probably had a little more meat on his hands. Do the rings fluctuate in size based on their own? Like, will it accommodate to fit anyone who tries to put it on, or is there like a limit to how far the metal?
No, that's definitely a theory, because like in the prologue, you see you see Sauron in that like giant whatever suit that he's in.
Oh, he has on like the gauntlet, right?
And he has the ring on his like giant hand on the outside of his armor, by the way. And then obviously later on, like Frodo puts it on. So there is this like theory and idea that the ring adapts to whoever it thinks is going to be the most like influential at that moment.
Gotcha. Okay. Interesting. So yeah, the ring's almost an organic, has a mind of its own.
Otherwise, that does mean that perhaps the dwarves had to come into the elven smithery and get a ring for a sizing.
A lot of Vaseline being used to exchange rings. Can you imagine you slip and fall? A ring you're holding flies into the air. You put out your hand. It falls exactly onto your finger. Unbelievable.
Pretty magical.
Unreal. Frodo in one. Got it in one, Frodo. Mm-hmm. Accidentally. He didn't mean to, but insane. Right? Yeah. Isn't that what happens? It falls onto his finger.
Yes. Yeah, you're correct.
He's a Michael Jordan of slipping and falling.
Yeah, I mean, you could make an argument that the ring is like a sentient thing.
It guided its way down.
It wanted to be on Frodo's finger. So it got
I like that. Thank you, because that makes me feel better about that moment than being like, come on.
Magic.
Come on. What are the odds?
In a movie of wizards and elves, and the thing that Adal has a problem with is the ring falling onto Frodo's finger.
Come on. It would have clunked off. Maybe if he did it 10 different times, have him fall, make him clumsy, have him fall 10 times. Though I actually, canonically, the thing that pisses me off the most, and I'll try and say this
I know what you're going to say, because I've heard you give this rant, I think, on like 3 separate podcasts.
Okay, then.
No, please go. Please share.
Fourth time's a charm. Very quickly, the thing that irks me the most in Lord of the Rings is when Gandalf falls to the Balrog. He's reborn, and Frodo is like, holy shit, Gandalf, what's up? Like, hey, we've been looking for you. Like, hey, Gandalf. And he goes, Gandalf? Huh, I do not know Gandalf. I am Gandalf the White. Insane behavior. Insane. That's like if you came up to me on the street and you're like, Adal, good to see you. And I look to my left and right. I go, Adal, young lady, I don't know an Adal. I'm Adal Rifai. And then I just walked away from you. That's fucking insane behavior.
You know what? We all have our grapes and our things.
We all have our picadillos. Yeah. You know what? You're right. I've ranted about this 4 times now. And here's what I have to do. I have to look inside and I have to say, Adal, you can't blame a clown for acting like a clown. You have to ask yourself why you keep going to the fucking circus. So I need to, anytime I see that scene, I need to fast forward through it, because otherwise I'm buying a ticket to the circus just to be mad at the clowns. And I shouldn't do that anymore. Thank you for helping me grow and for teaching me about the rings.
You're welcome. I'm just here to do my job. Yeah.
Yes.
So yeah, this last dwarven ring, the Ring of Thror, his son Thrain.
Oh boy, we got it. Here's what I let Thror slide. I'm not letting Thrain slide. That's just rain with a T. That's just rain with a T.
It's train with an H.
Yes.
Who is Thorin's father. Sure. Thrain becomes he one day he's just like off somewhere because he's grown restless and is upset with like the state of like what the dwarves are in and like their lack of status and wealth. And so he just like goes off, and one day he disappears, and they later find out that he was taken and kidnapped by like Sauron's forces and supposedly killed, and the ring is gone. So by the time we get to, I'll like kind of, cap end it with this. When we get to the events of Lord of the Rings, the 3 elven rings do still exist. One of them is in Galadriel's possession. One of them is in Elrond's possession. And then the third one was originally given to an elf named Círdan, who's a shipwright. And he has
Círdan.
essentially...
Great name, Círdan.
Yeah, Círdan. That one's okay.
We like
Glad
that
to
one.
know. He's essentially been at the harbors of Middle Earth since like the beginning of like the elves' existence. Like that's been his job almost, is like ferrying people back and forth. And when Gandalf comes to Middle Earth, he senses that Gandalf has this like greater purpose and mission, and he gives him the ring. So at the end of Lord of the Rings, the 3 elven rings with Galadriel, Elrond, and Gandalf sail off into the west with them. The 9 rings, we know the ring wraiths are destroyed in the aftermath. The 7 dwarven rings. So it says 4 were destroyed in various dragon attacks. 3 are recovered.
That used to be so common. They used to say you're more likely to get in a dragon attack than you are, anything else, especially like 5 miles from home. Most dragon attacks happen within 5 miles from home. People, back then.
Yeah, people don't know that.
That was just
Be aware. Be aware, guys. Be on the lookout. Be aware of your surroundings.
You mentioned ring wraiths. Ring wraiths, am I right in that those were the 9 men who used to have the rings?
Yes.
Didn't they turn it? Okay,
and they
so
became
they
like so corrupted that they became like dark servants of Sauron.
Gotcha. And true or false, Harry Potter just copy-pasted ring wraiths and then called them Dementors?
Dementors, yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Yes, you're correct. A lot of fantasy did that from Tolkien, to be fair. Like a lot of fantasy. There are so many. I was reading something or some comment. Someone was saying that like they watch Lord of the Rings now and they're like, wow, this has so many tropes, blah, blah, blah. And then they kind of had a realization of like, oh no, this is the origin of these tropes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. He started it. Yeah.
So yeah, the dwarven rings like basically no longer exist. And then obviously we know what happened to the One Ring, which I was actually just talking about this with our mutual friend, Christina Kahn. Mm-hmm. And she, out of nowhere, unprompted, just goes, it really bothers me that in the end, Frodo didn't actually destroy the ring. Like, what a sheer stroke of luck and coincidence that it just happened to fall in with Gollum. She's like, that really upsets me. That ultimately Frodo was so destroyed by the... Yes, exactly. Yeah. That he was so destroyed by the ring that he couldn't do the thing that he set out to do.
Well, there's also the big... absolutely. There's also the big thing about why didn't Gandalf just give the ring to the eagles? But I forget what the reasoning was. Is it like once they goes on their talons,
the reasoning is mostly that the eagles wouldn't. That they would be like, no.
Well, famously, the last concert they did was the Hell Freezes Over concert. And some of them have died. I think Glenn Fry has died.
Yeah, that would have been their answer, though. Yes. When Hell Freezes Over, we will take the ring. The other argument is that like this is supposed to be a stealth mission, and flying in on giant eagles is not particularly stealthy.
Well, you get them so high, and then they drop it. You get it like above radar. They fly above radar, drop the ring, like attach like when you go to a gas station and try and use the bathroom, and they're like, here you go, and it's like 20 pounds chained to a key.
It's like a cinder block.
Yeah, exactly. You do that with the ring. You have them fly above Sauron's radar, which we all know loses its steam after, I don't know, let's say 2 miles.
It has a limit,
just drop it straight down. Yeah, exactly. It's a little dome.
It could have happened. There are other theories. The most famous is the transitive property theory, which is that Sam carries Frodo with the ring up the mountain and is not affected by the ring. So why couldn't they get a mouse attached, like give the mouse like a tiny little ring necklace and then carry the mouse to Mordor?
Yeah, because the mouse is too simple, just like Sam, too simple to be turned by the ring. Is that what you're saying?
No, that the theory is that like the ring would corrupt the mouse, but because they are carrying the mouse, they wouldn't be affected by it. Like they're carrying the mouse who is carrying the ring, but they are not carrying the ring.
I like this in theory, but also that's my fucking nightmare to have like a little creature turn evil, and I'm like, I don't know where it went.
Okay,
or
so
something.
what would be your choice of animal to give the ring to then take on a adventure to Mordor?
Interesting. Okay, yes. I think a worm. I think if you tie a worm in a knot through the ring, and PETA, I know you're listening. It's fine. You can tie a worm and it'll still live. You can cut them in half and they still live. They thrive, actually. So I'd say tie a worm and then attach that to like something. And so it's hanging off the worm the whole time, because worms are basically nature's chain links. Or also something that's like dumb, like a goldfish. Because a goldfish is going to be like, ha ha ha, yes. And then 3 seconds later, it'll be like, what was I? Oh,
I think the goldfish is the way to go. Drop the ring in the fishbowl.
Yes.
Carry the fishbowl to Mordor.
Yes. Goldfish swallows it. Get within 500 feet. Chuck that goldfish like a baseball into the volcano. Bob's your uncle.
Yeah. Well, there we go. We just solved Lord of the Rings. We saved Tolkien 1,000 pages. And the thrilling franchise that started the next Ken Burns career would never happen. So there we go. I think we just destroyed society, actually.
We destroyed society. We feel really good about it. Hey, quick shout out to the real Lord of the Rings. I want to say Simone Biles, possibly Sonic the Hedgehog, big ring king. Bret the Hitman Hart, King of the Ring. Who else? I
don't know. I don't know anyone else who has rings.
Alexander Graham Bell, the original ring. The original ring. Ahoy, hoy.
On a similar note, Raffi, who has that banana phone.
Absolutely. Barnum and Bailey, who created 3 of the most famous rings.
Multiple Lords of the Rings.
Arguably.
Out
yes,
there.
Exactly. So a ton of just wanted to give a quick shout out. We would be remiss if we did not give a shout out to some of our ring kings. Thank you, Ring
IRL Lords of the Rings. Adal, what have we learned today?
We've learned that when you're trying to gift something, when you come to someone's door with a smile, a facade, and you try and gift someone something, that one, as the person on the other end of the door, never take a ring from a stranger, okay? They pull up in a white horse with no windows. Don't trust them. Be on alert. Never take a ring from a stranger. 2, if you're giving the rings, even though you're using subterfuge and disguise and glamours or whatever to disguise yourself as the selfish gift giver, you still want something. So ultimately, everyone has ulterior motives. No one is altruistic. The ring, there's something wrong with the ring. And in this case, obviously something very wrong with the rings. Also, dwarves are unaffected by most things, which means maybe they don't access their emotions. So we need more dwarves to go to therapy. Okay, a dwarf would rather mine for 1,000 years than go to therapy. Okay,
yeah,
dwarves.
True that.
Go to therapy. Yes, go to therapy. We've also learned, and this is the last thing I'll say, and this is the most important thing I learned. And thank you for everything you've taught me for being my guide on this journey, for being my strider, if you will. The number one thing I've learned is that orcs ruin restaurants. Looks like raspberry vinaigrette salads back on the seasonal menu, boys. If that's how they read everything, is one of them reads the menu and reads aloud to all of them, that sucks. They've ruined the industry. That's why your waiter takes 20 minutes longer, because they have to serve these urukai. It's just bad news all around. So yeah. Yeah.
I couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Where can the good people find you on the internet? What are you up to? What would you like to share with the people?
Yes, I do too many podcasts. You can
That
find
is correct.
Oh no.
They're all great. That sounded really negative. I just mean like I am astounded every time you release a podcast, and I'm like, how?
You can find the podcast I do. Hey Riddle is a riddle lateral based thinking improv podcast I do with some friends. Hello from the Magic Tavern is a fantasy podcast that's completely improvised with wizards and
that one does have humor. That is fantasy with humor, yes. Almost exclusively humor, yes, in fact.
But to be a kettle, calling a pot, we have a lot of fart and burp humor, I'm sure, throughout the season. So my apologies there. My second apology letter.
Bummer.
Can also find out the podcast, Tell Me About It, the game show, and also the Word Association, which is a newer one I'm doing. with two of my best friends, and we just kind of it's an excuse for us to hang out. And if you want to listen, God bless. But if you don't, we're just
I respect that. No, I've listened. I was recently doing something where I just had to have something on in the background for like several hours, and I just put on several episodes of that, and I love how friendly and like casual and everything it is. It's very fun. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. I feel like not every show, we need shows with premises, but if you already have 5 or 6 podcasts, maybe get you a podcast that's just like you chatting with no expectations versus any amount of high concept or anything like that. And not every podcast you're shooting to get 10,000 patrons. So sometimes you can just do a podcast to keep in contact with your friends.
Yeah, that's essentially what all my podcasts are. None of them are shooting for anything. Thank you so much for joining me. Listeners, as always, you can follow the podcast on social media at TolkienAboutPod. And until next time, and perhaps this could possibly be the last episode of the series if everything passes with the strikes and the unions and everything, and potentially cursing everything by saying that. Actually, there are a few more important things before we go. The first is that this will not be the last episode of Drunk Middle-earth History. I just came up with this idea in the past couple days, and I'm trying to make it happen because I think it'll be really fun. Next week, I'm going to do a live show on Thursday, December 14th at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on my Twitch channel, twitch.tv/MCWhatsUp. Topic? TBD. Guest? TBD. But I think it'll be really fun. It'll be really silly. And then if all goes according to plan, I'll take the audio from that show and post it the following week as the episode. And I think the stream itself will be posted on my Twitch channel. So if you happen to miss it, if you can't tune in live, that's okay. You'll be able to access it after the fact. And a little sneak peek into my brain of what I'm thinking we might do is either Bill the Pony or Tolkien's Father Christmas letters. If you don't know, when Tolkien's kids were young, he wrote them very extensive, elaborate letters as Father Christmas, and they were published into a book. It's a really wonderful, cute book, an amazing, wonderful story. And I actually did a whole episode on that last year, if you want to go back and listen to that. But again, yeah, for all I know, it might just be me reading these silly little Father Christmas letters to you. But again, I think either way, it'll still be fun. So again, next Thursday, December 14th at 8 p.m. And the next important announcement is that Skywalk Before You Run will be launching in January 2024. Woo! Thunderous applause. Thunderous applause. It's been a long journey to a galaxy far, far away, folks, but we're finally getting there. I don't have an official launch date just yet because I want to make sure that everything is all squared away with the planning and scheduling. So I'm not going to say a definitive date right now, but I am thinking it might be the earlier half of January. So if you want to stay up to date on all the latest news regarding that, make sure to follow along on social media at Skywalk Before You Run or Tolkien About Pod. But until hopefully next time, go water your plants. They are dying. Go help them.